Okay, so just in case some of these nuances are lost, I made sure to check the Chinese for each term. And so this is what I get. Verification is that query. Okay, now today is validation, and then the last replication. So from the previous week, verification is simply something that you do with your model for yourself to determine whether or not the model is actually doing what you intended it to do. There are a wide array of things. There's actually a pattern of common mistakes where certain coding systems look like they ought to achieve one outcome, when in fact they actually do something else. We looked at a couple of examples of that. Oftentimes, one of the biggest problems you have to watch is the order of the commands and the way in which a change at an earlier level to an earlier algorithm has consequences for the implementation of the next algorithm in the loop. And so sometimes, I think some of you had models, we had exercises, models where you were producing all blue people by the end, when in fact you were trying to get equal numbers of blue people and red people swapping identities back and forth. And that problem had to do with the sequence and the order in which the changes were being undertaken. And so while luckily in that case, you could see immediately, oh, that's not what I wanted it to be doing because of the color. But very oftentimes these mistakes will be hidden in the code and do not produce visible or noticeable abnormalities in the model itself, in the interface. And so the only way in which you can catch these is if you do a couple of different things. One is always develop your model stepwise, one step at a time, from its simplest level to its most complex level. And every single time you add another level of complexity, check to see whether or not something in the earlier part of the algorithm has been broken or thrown out of whack or is generating results that were unintended by you. Because every time a new link is put in the chain of data transfer, there are opportunities for it to have ramifications on earlier links in the chain. Okay. And that's simply what we meant. We showed some ways in which you can put checkups within the code itself. But of course, this is you always need to be verifying all the time. It's never really the case that you're ever done verifying. There are always possibilities of bugs in software. That's just built into the nature of software. So now, validation. Well, let me see. Between the term we had for verification and the term now that we have for validation, help me understand what are the differences between the two concepts and the nuances between the meaning of those two terms. How is validation different from verification? When you hear those two words in Chinese, how do they differ?
You mean the traditional and simplified?
No. I meant verification and then validation. Because sometimes in Chinese, in the translation, you will detect nuances because it's your native language in a way that you won't detect if we're using two English terms. So I'm wondering whether or not what differences between those two concepts come to mind, if any.
Yes, we have a huge difference between these two terms in Chinese.
There is not much difference between the two. So if you were to hear them, can you swap them? Can you place one in place of another? In English, we call that a synonym, right? Two terms that mean basically the same thing, and so you swap them, they're interchangeable. Are these two terms interchangeable?
I have just checked the definition in software developing. Verification is like the engineering making sure that the code he or she writes is correspondent with the requirement from managers. And validation is like the customers or the admissioners making sure that the eventual code given to him or her is what he needs. Like he uses it very well and the surface looks nice, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's much closer to the meaning of the terms that they're using here. So verification is debugging, and it's kind of like you asked me for a piece of code that does this. Here, I give it to you, and then you go through and take a look at it and decide whether or not it's actually doing what I asked you to make it do. Validation, by contrast, is that you're handing it over to somebody else, and you're asking them whether or not the software performs the way it's supposed to perform, right? It's pretty easy. It's not hard for us to make interesting looking software with interfaces for all of us to look at and say, oh, that's really interesting. I see things. I think I understand things. But it can be that it's completely superficial in the sense that it looks good, but underneath it's not really doing much at all. I'll show you a couple interface types of things that are meant to really kind of improve the visuals of the image of the interface even more, that are in the book, in a chapter that you're not reading. But all of us spend time, we all want our models to look good, right? We all pick shapes that correspond to what we want. You have the ability to create your own shapes in NetLogo if you don't like any of the shapes that they have to correspond to your turtles. But in reality, little arrows or checks and zeros could literally do most of this for you. Some of the most interesting models have really boring interfaces, but they have really incredible code, algorithms, chains of information processing that are absolutely brilliant. And so it may look like on the surface that it's doing what you say it's doing, but to really validate it, you need to give it to other people and check to see whether or not it's doing what you claim it's doing. So let's talk a little bit about validation processes when it comes to looking at models. So these are all the things that you want to do when you get to a point where you have what you think is a pretty good model. Your model's actually more or less doing everything that you want it to do. Maybe it's got some idiosyncrasies and you're not quite sure why they are. I'm actually going to show you one of my models and an idiosyncrasy that it has that I've been perplexed about for a while, but it's mostly a good model. So validation is a process of ensuring that there is a correspondence between the model itself and the reality that it's designed to represent. That is, does it map onto reality? in the same way that this map here maps on top of this map right here, right? And so the real world looks like this. Only this is the real world. And then we generate models of this world with increasing levels of abstraction, like this. And the question is whether or not this map corresponds to this reality. So let me see. Here's the lake. This is where I live, in the guest house. This thing here is called the forest, right there. Although all the trees are planted in straight lines in a pattern. And so I think it's a forest that only an engineer would dream of, right? Not many others. I mean, it's literally a matrix of trees, right? Not especially forest-like. But it does correspond to reality because I think there, if I'm not mistaken, right there's the main gate. If I'm looking at this, right here's the lake, and it's right there. Now, I have checked, and when I leave that place, go out on this road and walk down here this way, I get to a place where I can eat. And if I go a little further, I get to a place where I can swim. And if I go a little further, I get to a place where I can run. And so the map seems to correspond to reality. But it is a much more abstract and simplified representation of this reality. I can say this map tells me something real about the world that it models. That's a validation. The model has been validated to correspond to the reality. It's simply observational, and we're going to want validation at much more rigorous levels than that, but that's basically the idea. So, validation and replication of models. It's basically that you've been working mostly on your own for a model, with your model, but really in the end, modeling is a group exercise. It requires people looking at each other, talking about the model, refining it. You've been working on your own, but part of it now is to go public and show it to other people and see what they think, see if they can understand it, see if they can interpret it, and see what works and what doesn't work with people that have not been sitting with your model for the last 6 or 8 weeks during the semester. Okay, there are 2 levels of verification. The first one, I think in the book they call micro-validation. And this is a smaller scale in the model where you look at the behaviors of the individual agents with the real world and whether or not they correspond to the world actors that you're modeling. Say you're working on traffic and we're looking at driving routes for trucks, right? So in your model, it'll look like this. But what you really want to understand is whether or not this does correspond in effect like this. Does this guy move around in the world in the way that this truck would? Individual agents. So the model is traffic. The individual agents are cars and motor scooters and trucks. Now, if your truck is behaving like a motorbike, that's a problem. The behavior of the truck ought to look different from the behavior of a car, of a pedestrian, or of a motorbike, right? How are the behavior of trucks different from the behavior of cars? Trucks cannot go down any street. Right? There are many streets that they avoid because the turns are too tight, right? The lanes are too narrow. The city has forbidden trucks to drive on certain roads because of congestion, what have you. Cars have more degrees of freedom. They can move around in your model more easily, but they need to be distinguished in their behavior from trucks. And of course, motorbikes have no rules, and so they can go anywhere they want all the time. At least it seems like to me. Maybe that's only Vietnam, where motorbike behavior is insane. If you're looking at your model and you find that your trucks are behaving just like cars, or your cars are behaving just like motorbikes, this is a problem in your model. Your agents are not acting like real-world actors are. So let me see, in each of your models, at the lowest level in your model, do you have individual people? Okay. How do your people act? Are there different kinds of people, and do they act differently? And that activity looks like how people act in the real world, or no? How closely does your agent match how people in the real world behave? You think yours is getting pretty good in the restaurant?
I think
Cafeteria?
I think kind of close.
You're seeing a better and better correspondence.
Yeah.
How about yours?
I think it's still be too ideal.
Is what?
Too ideal.
Too ideal.
Yes.
Why?
Because like I assume that the individuals will switch their language when they meet again with the people that they talk with the same language with. But in maybe real life, actually they will meet with other people and talk like in mother language with them. But when they just leave that place, they will again switch back to use Mandarin.
Yeah. So
it's not so realistic.
and there could be different reasons for why not all people reject or accept things for the same reasons. Now, in your model, probably rejection or adoption are kind of the two choices that they have. Do your agents have the ability to say no right now? Are you going to try and give them that ability?
Yeah, but I'm still a little bit, I do not have an idea to how to make it, giving them that ability to say no.
To say no. So if I were to look at your model then, just in a situation, I would look at your model. And if I was watching them and I watched your agents and I say, wow, every time they meet someone with a different language, they change. I would say, and then, you're looking at that and I say, now, is that how the world actually works? And I could study population, and I could look up academic studies of population and language change and say, well, no, you're missing a part of that, and I think it would substantially change your model if you incorporated that. Certainly, I think yes and no is the first division, but then yes or no, why, right? Yes because A, B, or C. No because of A, B, or C, right? And so suddenly a decision that's automatic has become now a decision that has six potential outcomes, right? A, B, or C, yes and no. And that then makes it more realistic, but also more complicated. But that's micro-validation and say, hey, the real world actually operates this way. The fact that they don't say no probably, for my money, would be a big strike against the model. And that would be the first thing to say, well, you got to get that in for this model to reflect reality better than it does, right? And it's always a more or less. I'm not saying that it's a bad model. I'm saying that's the piece that I would say you need to target in the next version of your model. Get that in there. So at a lower level, smaller scale, your model requires attention to all the details of individual actors in the world. And remember, in this world, we have patches, we have turtles, we have links now, right? And each one has its own, you're writing the rules for how these agents act in the world. And your most important task is to say, how well do my agents act like actors in the real world? Remembering that the only 100% valid model of the world is the world, and every map is going to lose detail, like the trees that are brown right here, right? And I don't see any of the bushes listed here. I don't see the actual outline of the building, so on and so forth. You're never going to get to a perfect model, but that doesn't let you off the hook from validating the fact that it actually corresponds to something in the real world. Macro level validation looks at the entire model and looks at the aggregate outcomes. Aggregate outcomes is the highest level at which the model operates. And so we'll look at one here, one of the more famous NetLogo models, this flocking behavior here. Do all of these birds, they flock with each other and they look amazingly organized when they move, right? Is it that they are amazingly organized? And the reality is that they're not. They are actually following very simple sets of rules that produce this pattern. And I'll show you the model that then produces this pattern in the real world. But we wouldn't know that until we had built this model and we actually discovered that we get this kind of design easily if we think of individual birds as just small biological robots with sensors that make micro adjustments to themselves based upon what they're seeing around. And then this macro level flocking organization appears out of nowhere. Term is self-organizing. So one is we would be looking at the behavior of an individual member of this group. What are the rules governing this? When you say ask turtles, you're really asking this one and this one and this one and this one to do something specific. You're asking each one of them. Now, assuming all of that is right, we're asking why, when they do these things, do I get this kind of shape and movement the way I do? How does the model give me insight into that? A third level of validation is the question of whether or not you have actual empirical data that's been collected about the world and whether or not the results of the model correspond to that data. Data collection is always supposed to be truth-telling about phenomena in the world around us. And so it is the kind of ultimate test for your model. As a matter of fact, I constantly tack back and forth. That is, I move back and forth between building a model and then comparing the outcome to empirical data that I have. If the empirical results of my model don't look like the data that I'm looking at, one of two things can be happening. Either that data is wrong, which can happen, right? Happens a lot, or there's something about my model that's wrong. So it's pretty good if you have a reliable set of data about something that you're studying. Just use that data and build your model around that, right? You don't need to study something that's well understood. Models, finally, there's always more than one way to model something. We say in English, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? take the skin off a cat. I don't know, it goes back to maybe, I don't know what, back in when we used to hunt. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Means there's more than one way to get the job done. And in this case, models of the same phenomena oftentimes aren't in competition with each other. They're two different ways of modeling the same phenomenon. And actually, if you have multiple models that look at the same phenomenon, and even though they implement it in the same way, they produce similar results, that's actually a really good situation to be in. It's actually really interesting to study from that perspective. That's like, maybe it's not quite the same as wave and particle descriptions of reality, but it's like that, right? Usually, though, when two models are implemented in different ways, it means they're asking slightly different questions. Think of the way in which early in the semester I got you to think about what kind of question you think would be good for modeling. What's the phenomenon? What kinds of questions do you have about it? And that question that's in your mind has been driving how you've built your model for the last 8-10 weeks, right, as you work on it. So every model is driven by a set of questions and is designed to answer those questions. And you always have to think about the model in terms of what was this person trying to find out. By the way, by the same measure, if someone looks at your model and says, well, it doesn't do this or it doesn't do that, then one thing you need to ask is whether or not they're looking at the same things you're looking at. It may very well be that they don't understand what the question was that you were using to make the model. Or they want a question answered that the model wasn't designed to answer, and you have to say, that's not what this model is for. You would need something different. So the flocking model is a model in NetLogo. It's very well tested, and it has been shown to fit the behavior of birds, of flocking, of fish swimming in schools, and of insects in the way in which they swarm. At least those three phenomena it seems to be that all of these species run similar kinds of algorithms that govern their behavior, their movement in the world. So we're interested in studying these patterns. The principal idea is that flocking, the generalized term for this in modeling, is an organized behavior that emerges for free. In other words, there is no leader in a flock of birds. There is no leader in a school of fish telling the school that they should turn in circles like this. There is nobody that's guiding the swarm of bees in some kind of flight plan, right? It is headless behavior. Literally, the pattern that you see in a flock of birds is really a zombie, right? It's got a body that's moving but no brain. Or put it a little differently, its brain is distributed all across all the birds. There's no central command structure. So in this case, nothing but micro adjustments result in absolute and big changes at the macro level when they're all added together. New, novel, unanticipated patterns emerge. So it looks like the behavior has been choreographed. Choreographed means that a director has organized a dance where everybody moves in relationship to everybody else in a pre-designed pattern. But there is no choreographer, there is no plan, there is no pattern. So with that, let's look at our big model for the day. So if you don't have the flocking model open up a version of it. It's in that search window. You can just type flocking and it'll come up. Otherwise, you can go to the textbook list at the bottom, chapter 7, I think. It'll have flocking in there. So just familiarize yourself with it. Hit setup. At the moment right now, all of these turtles are randomly distributed and they are oriented in a random set of directions. Okay. There's a population of 300 of them in there, and we're going to investigate each one of these. These are the micro patterns that govern each individual turtle and how it moves. Right now we're just going to look at it at the default settings. Now, it's important to note that none of these turtles are talking to any of the other turtles. That is, none of these turtles can see from the perspective that we do in God mode. They don't know that these groups are actually forming up right now. They can't tell. This person right here does not know that this person here is actually leading the flock. They're unaware of each other. All they know is their most immediate local environment, and yet we get this kind of pattern emerging. All right, let's look at the code. Okay. So, you only have turtles, but they have two variables. The first one is this group called flock mates, that the declaration says that's an agent set of turtles that are nearby me. Nearby, if I'm a turtle, I have a list of flock mates that are in my vicinity. And then last but not least, I have something called the nearest neighbor, which is basically who among all the turtles in my small group of friends is closest to me. That's it, the only two variables you need. Now look at setup. Just to guarantee, we have first off create turtles, and we have population. Population isn't defined, so population must be over here. It's right there in the slider. So it says create turtles, whatever that slider is. They were different colors. This is, if you haven't seen this trick before, this is a nice little trick. Here, it sets the color, it's setting it yellow -2 plus random 7. And it says there's no other reason for doing this other than the fact that a variety of shades of yellow look nice. So think about, if you go to Tool and you think of color swatches, yellow is 45. It says yellow -2, which takes it down to the value of 43, and then it says plus random 7. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 must be down there. -2, yellow -2 plus random 7. So notice that starts 2 below yellow, and then it gives it any number between 1 and 6, or 0 and 6. Moves forward again, and it gets you a range of colors because random are randomly selected. So if you go back to the interface, notice that the turtles have different shades. You can do that too with your agents. It's a pretty fun little trick. Set size 1.5, set XY random X coordinates, and then it says set flock mates, no turtles. Basically, that variable up there reports nobody. Empty set. Okay, to go. Now, keep an eye on everything in here. It says ask turtles flock. And then it says repeat 5 times. Ask the turtles to go forward 2/10 of a display. Now, why would it do that? This is the interesting thing. Flock is what we're trying to get it to do, and that's down here. So that's really the only command in the go section of the model. It has one command only. But then it's telling that to repeat 5 times, and it only moves forward at 2/10 of a patch in the display. Why is that? Well, it actually makes the turtles move more slowly. That is, they glide. Notice what you want in a flock is you want them to glide smoothly like that. Now, suppose I were to go back here, in that code, and suppose I make that 0.9, and I go back and I hit go. See the little shuffling that you get there? Shuffle, 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 shuffle. And if I hit 2, and then I hit go, ooh, I've got to slow it down. See, now it's starting to look like, it might be looking like your model a little bit, and some of my models too. But notice how it's shifting with those big abrupt changes. By putting this down at 0.2 and then repeating it in a loop 5 times, that actually smooths out the overall movement. Whoops. See the difference? That's also a cool little trick in this model, that you get that kind of nice, easy glide with that one little change to the code. This little guy right here. But it requires a lot of, it says down here, make sure that you recognize that it requires a lot of computing power, and so your model's going to run a lot slower. All right, here we go. Now, to flock. How are we going to achieve this flocking behavior? First off, the first thing you got to do is you got to find your flock mates. So notice we haven't seen anything up to this point. I see a term there, find flock mates. Do you remember where find flock mates exists? Whenever one key is whenever it comes up in black, that means it's a new procedure that hasn't been defined, and it's not up here. We have flock mates, but we don't have find flock mates. So that means you want to go down below this procedure and find out where he defines what find flock mates is. And it's right here. And it says, to find flock mates, set flock mates, other turtles in radius vision. Now, right away, vision, we don't know what vision is yet. So it must be in the front, and it's right here. Vision means 5 patches. So right here you have this turtle, and it has a vision that moves in a radius of 5 patches in all directions. Let's see how big this world is. Oh, look, see, the world is 35 by 35 by 35 by 35. So that's a big world, and so seeing 5 patches is not that far. Okay, let's hit OK. So they're probably actually only seeing something like this here. So, set flock mates, that's that variable up there. All the turtles that you can find that are within my field of vision, right? Which is 6 patches across. All right, done that, found flock mates. Let's just do this. Now it says, if there are any flock mates, then find the nearest neighbor. Nearest neighbor was this variable up here. Find out of that group the nearest neighbor. All right, who's the nearest neighbor? To find the nearest neighbor, you have to set nearest neighbor minimum, that is the one minimum of flock mates, distance myself. So sometimes reading backwards. The distance from myself of all the flock mates, find the least or minimum of those. All right, read that again. You read it backwards. Distance from me, from myself. Remember here we're asking a bird to find whoever is in their neighborhood that's closest. So distance from me of out of all my flock mates, pick the one of, who has the minimal value for distance, and make that one my nearest neighbor. So now what we've done is we've defined who our flock mates are, and we've defined who our nearest neighbor is. See how that works? Did I lose anybody? All right. Set the population, random distribution, ask them to flock. That's what the model is. And we smoothed it out by repeating it 5 times for every step. And now we're looking to find our flock mates, which was this around here. It defined them as those within a certain range of vision, 3 in all directions. Outside of that, the birds can't see. Then we asked it to find its nearest neighbor, which is being defined as that member of my group of flock mates who is closest in distance, minimum, one of. So distance of all my flock mates, whoever has the least from me. And that now becomes the variable nearest neighbor for that turtle. Okay, now we go up. If else, okay, look here, if else, that basically means you're going to have 2 sets of brackets, one corresponding to the if condition, and then the other one corresponding to the else. So if you see the if right there at the beginning, that's going to correspond to this, separate. If, though, it's the else, then it's going to correspond to align and cohere. Okay, 3 things that it can do. If any flock mates, find the nearest neighbor. If the nearest neighbor is less than the minimum separation, and we haven't seen minimum separation, so it's right there. The minimum separation that you have to have is 1 patch. So if I find the flock mate closest to me, and it turns out that it's closer than 1 patch, then you're going to need to, basically you're telling it, back off, buddy, get away from me, separate, put space between me and you. Down here, you're going to have something called, this is what I mean by separate. To separate, turn away a heading of the nearest neighbor max separation turn. So let's see, max separation turn, 1.5 degrees. That means it can only turn, the bird, if I'm trying to get it away from me, will only turn 1.5 degrees. Max align, we can't do that. Maximum separation is 1, max separate turn, right? Those are the only 2 you need to know for this. So find flock mates. Separate, turn away the heading of the nearest neighbor max separate turn. So max separate turn more or less means up to the setting right now, turn 1.5 degrees away from me, because I'm trying to get a bird to go away. But if it's close to me but above the minimum separation is 1 patch, then do these 2 things, align and cohere. To align, I want you to turn towards the average of the flock mates and their heading, maximum aligned turn. Maximum aligned turn is how much can you turn in order to cohere close to me? And the answer is 5 degrees. Cohere is down here, and it's turned towards the average heading towards flock mates max cohere turn. Let me see if I can draw a picture. You're going to get lost in all the terms. Okay. That's a turtle. Remember, the turtle can see in 3 patches in all directions. That turtle, it can't see. Those turtles, it can see. because it's within its vision field, right? Now, take all of these turtles and figure out the distance between them. Distance A, B, C, and D. Which one of those is shortest? Okay, whichever one is shortest, let's just say this one here is, right? That's going to be my, what's the term? Flock mate? Flock mates and nearest. So who are my flock mates? This turtle, he has two things that he keeps in mind. One is, who are his flock mates? And his flock mates are turtle 4, turtle 7, turtle 9, turtle 12. All right, those are his flock mates. He's got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got 4 turtles in his world. And they're all known by numbers. Then he has a second thing that he keeps in mind. Nearest neighbor. And so he looks at how close or far away they all are, and he says, this one's closest to me. So nearest neighbor is turtle, we'll just say it's T4. That's all our turtle thinks about the whole time. Think about that, though, as if you're a bird flying in this flock, the only two things you need to be thinking about is the turtles that are immediately around you and who's closest out of all those turtles that are around you, all right? Okay, now the first thing it has to do, first thing that it does is this is that if-else line of code up there. Let me see, if-else, where did it go? There, right there. If any of the, if my closest turtle is closer to me than the minimum separation that I require, like maybe for my wingspan or for my aerodynamics, if it is closer to me than that separation, then I want it to move away from me some. So move away from me. How far should I tell it to move away from me? Or how far should I move away from it? Well, that's defined by the turn away heading of the nearest neighbor max separation turn. So I say, hey, you're too close. The max separation is, that's going straight ahead, 1.5 degrees. Turn that way. (1.5 degrees), which I think was what it was, right? What was max separation? Minimum separation was 1. Max separate turn 1.5 degrees. Okay, turn away 1.5 degrees. So if I've got a turtle here and I've got another turtle that is right there and we're both trying to fly, that's a problem. So I say, veer off a little bit, or I will veer off a little bit. And so on the next step, now we have separation. But that person's still going to be in my field of vision now, so it's still going to be part of my flock mates. It'll just keep spaced away from me. All right, if this condition, though, is not met, then I want you to do this. And what I want you to think about is that more or less you're asking them to perform some basic trigonometric functions. Right? Those trigonometric functions, which I don't think we want to go into. Have you guys had trigonometry in advanced geometry? Yeah. So, but it's probably those things from school that like drove you nuts: cosine and sine and tangent, right? That's what we're talking about. But basically, those here in this model, we're telling them to line up. We're looking at all of our mates, flock mates, and we're telling them, line up with me a little bit. And then cohere is a little more complicated and harder to understand. Turn towards average heading, towards flock mates, max cohere turn. Mostly what you're talking about there in each one of those. Which one is which? You guys, you math people, help me out. So if I'm standing right here, cosine is what? Cosine would be the hypotenuse, wouldn't it? Yeah.
The division
Of the closeness angle and the hypotenuse. Right, it's division of A over B is cosine.
the B would be the
Hypotenuse. And the reverse of that is sine.
sine will be the other side from C to
C and B.
C divided by B.
B.
斜边、顶边、对边。
That's sine or cosine. That's sine. And tangent is this one by that one, right? Is you learned this in high school? Yeah, right? But more or less, think of it, it's me, and I'm flying off in this direction, and in order for me to decide which orientation I want, I'm running different functions. There are some complications about an older version of NetLogo that make this is easier than it was before. It used to be much more difficult. Part of the problem has to do with the fact that the addition and subtraction of angles in NetLogo is complicated because you actually have a fixed grid with 0 degrees here and 180 down here. So if it's going through and adding and subtracting angles, it makes decisions based on absolute positions rather than relative positions in the model, which you can't do because then it won't calculate data specific to a single turtle in its location. All right, so here I am, and I'm trying to decide, over here's this guy. I'm trying to decide if I go this way, if I go this way, if I go that way, how am I going to do it? How am I going to fly given the calculations that I make and organize myself in this? So notice what it's doing is all of the decision making that's being made by any individual turtle is, who do I see around me? Am I too close? Put distance. If I'm in the right zone, then align myself with that turtle a little bit and make sure that I'm not cutting into any other turtle space, and let's keep flying. That's all it does, right? That's all it knows. So when I hit setup again, this person, think of it, just looking around here, who's around me, right? Anybody here too close? Well, then turn away just a little bit. Anybody in my immediate vicinity? Average out our headings, right? Align myself relative to other people around, and let's take off together. Repeatedly following these low algorithms, these simple decision-making rules, that's all these people are doing. They don't know anything about what's happening in their larger world. And yet they get this kind of pattern from it. Now, Let's play with your model a little bit. Try giving them a higher angle of turn to align. See what we get. Are they going to flock? We got flocking.
Yeah.
What do you mean, kind of? That's flocking. How is that not flocking? We have some little people kind of like, every so often someone kind of like moves way out. Notice that they get off on these tangents mostly because we gave them a greater range of movement when they're aligning to their flock mates. So you see more variation side to side. See how those go? Look back and forth. It's because they got 5 degrees instead of, I can't remember what it was before. Or no, they've got almost 10 degrees. Before it was just 5.
I have one question for this model.
Yep.
This flocking model, it seems need to go certain direction, right?
Are you asking whether or not it could be going that way or?
Yeah, because supposedly the birds are flying seasonally. They seem
Oh,
to
back
have
and
some-
forth.
Yeah, back and forth. They seem to have some direction. So it seems to be that way, right?
This particular model is basically describing collection of birds at one instant, not over a full year cycle, but only with one set of flights. So if you see a set of birds with this elaborate choreography in a landscape out over a field, that's what's driving this. So I don't think, let me see, I thought you were asking whether or not, see, most of those flocks were flying this way, west to east. Let's see if these start flying in a different pattern.
Because this kind of model is, the one big question is how can they fly seasonally back and forth, and who leads the direction. But I don't know. So I thought that this model can also be.
That has to do with changing signals from ambient temperature and star positions.
Okay.
A lot of birds will fly all night and all day, and mostly what they do is they're following patterns that have to do, they're following astronomical guideposts, right? But there are also some indicators like temperature change, environment change. All right. Let's hit stop, and then we'll hit setup again, and I'm going to hit go. In these sliders, you can, well, let's get a flocking pattern first, and then I'm going to play with some of these sliders. Let's make it speed up a little bit, go faster. Doesn't have quite the same relaxation properties. Okay. Now, let's make their cohere turn bigger. 8.5. So you look at that, they have a certain range of turning that allows them to stay in a flocking pattern, and after that, it breaks.
If we use a 3D model, well,
See how it looks in 3D?
yes.
System, switch to 3D mode. So you go like that, the illusion is broken. If you go like that, you can kind of get a little bit, but that's a fake, that's fake 3D, right? Not good. Not all of them work very well.
Because the way you do it should be like a 3D, right? Because it's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a limitation of just doing it in 2D. Oh, see, destroys the flocking. They have no ability to flock anymore. See, part of the problem is in each one of these cases, what they're doing is overcompensating. That is, their sensors pick up a potential problem and they react, but they're overreacting. And so by cranking these values up each time, they're overreacting and losing that flocking pattern. Let's make it so they underreact.
And also the boundary.
Oh, if the boundary wasn't wrapping?
Yeah. If it is unwrapping, I don't know, because they might change the flocking behavior.
So now.
Or we go to the setting, unwrap.
Yeah, I'm going to go into the setting and after I see what this does. Okay. Now I'm going to have to get those settings turned off. We're going to stop wrapping. I think they're going to run into the wall and just be in trouble.
Yeah, they just run into the wall.
Their beaks are getting stuck in the wall when they fly into it.
So which means if we don't have boundary, this kind of flocking behavior might be different.
It is the reason why wrapping or no wrapping is a problem is because this creates a very different dynamic in spatial relationships. Yeah. And as a result, that can alter the way in which the model can behave. In this particular case, you end up with this really goofy result. You remember the one, heroes and cowards, we had early on, where if you wrapped it and they ran heroes, if everyone is trying to be a coward, by the end, it ended up with all people up against the wall, backed up against the wall, trying to avoid getting close to anybody. That's a boundary condition. If we had eliminated those boundaries, we made the walls open. If the world was wrapping and the cowards were running, the cowards would just continue to back out one side of the world and show up in the other side of the world at the same time.
So then it raises a question about how does this present a natural way? Because in the nature, where is spatially we don't have this kind of boundary.
Yeah, that's right. And so that kind of hard boundary, well, first off, you're dealing with an idealized Euclidean geometry in this world, and that already is a pretty serious deviation from the actual world conditions, right? And therefore, as a result of that, you have to set finite limits on how far the world goes. Because two parallel lines go off in one direction for infinity, and no one can build a model that reaches all the way out to infinity. So you have to create a world that's just a window. And you have to decide whether or not they can move outside that world or this defines the world for you. Okay, I hope you like the flocking model. It's a pretty cool one. And it makes sense on a couple of different levels. It used to be, let me see, a Roomba. You know one of those Roomba vacuum cleaners that move around? Early versions of that drove around your room, and it made a map of your room in its head, right? So it knew it could go there, and it could go there, and it could go there, or it could go back there. And slowly but surely, it would build up a comprehensive plan of how the world is laid out. Now, you could mess with your Roomba, you could cause it to be confused by just moving furniture around, and then it would have to remap everything. Companies actually initially liked the fact that their robots mapped the room, because that map gets transmitted back to the company, and that map then gets sold to somebody who will then know more or less it's that size, probably a sofa, probably a lamp, probably a desk. I bet they might be interested in potentially buying a new sofa, a new couch, or a new table, right? So that's one of the ways, that's how they made money off of that, sold that information to advertisers. Data mining is everywhere all the time. But they found out a far more efficient way to run that robot sweeper, Zumba. Isn't it Zumba? What do you call yours? Roombas. We call them Roombas. Are your robots the robots that sweep your floors?
We don't ask robot to clean our house. We ask human to clean our house.
Nobody has robots in their house that sweep?
扫地机器人啊。
我们家还没有这个。
You don't. I know you don't.
Many people might have. They have. They are using. Yeah.
But like for a 2-3 bedroom, yeah, they have those.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Some people, especially those who have some dogs and cats.
Yeah, because of the fur.
But does that kind of way to making data violate the privacy?
No, not when you sign the contract. Anything you buy, you know, those terms and conditions that you have to check on, say you agree, you are giving them most frequently permission to keep some important data. They will tell you they need it in order to improve service to you, but they can also make money off of it from a bunch of different ways. So here's a Roomba right there, right? It has, this is a charging station. It always knows where it is. It goes out in the world, clean, 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 and when it gets low on power, it goes back and sits right there in that and recharges, then goes back out. And you have to check it, especially if you have dogs or cats, because it gets full very quickly.
But not every family uses it.
Well, yeah, I understand that. Anyway, while that's loading, the alternative to do this, and it is from a robotics point of view much more efficient, is you simply give it a set of sensors that has a very small, finite reach around itself, and it drives in one direction, and when it bumps into something, it sees an obstacle, it backs up, turns certain degrees, then goes forward, whoops, no, and then it can move. It doesn't need to record any information. It doesn't need to have complex mental structures. All it needs to do is have a constant renewing feedback loop between sensors and basic, simple algorithms that govern its movement. And that's all. Flocking is exactly the same way, or school fish that school. Now, it's a behavior that evolved to avoid predation, right? They school together because there's safety in numbers, right? Any individual fish is less likely to be eaten if it's in a school than if it's out on its own. And insects, same way. Okay. Let's take a break. So, we use the word correspond, and we need to make it a little more nuanced or a little more complicated how we find correspondences, because oftentimes models will produce a range of outcomes, and so I'll give you an example. So here is the latest and greatest version of one of the models I've been working on for some time. And it models The blue line you'll see here are PAs, otherwise as animals that are preyed upon. These are the hunter population. And then this here is an emergent farming or agricultural population. If you know anything about the history of the prehistory of the emergence of agriculture, we had the last glacial maximum, that is the last time that the glaciers on the top of the planet extended down around the planet. The last ice age achieved its biggest extent at 20,000 years ago. And then things warmed up and human populations spread out in lots of different places they hadn't been before, living as hunters and gatherers, nomadic lifestyles, moving around, only passively taking from their environment what the environment could provide. That lasts until about the year 10,000 BCE, or around 8,000, 8,500, when you have a cooling event that causes populations to have to shift because wildlife, what they came to be dependent upon, that population decreased. And in this particular model here, these are the animals that this population is dependent upon. So the initial setting for this is the number of hunter-gatherers, when you set it up, are 100. And if I blow that up, you can see the hunter-gatherers dispersed around. And then you can see the prey animals. They're randomly distributed. When you first set it up, if I have the slow down, they're going to begin, you'll see them moving around. Essentially, they're starting to organize themselves into a hunting band at the very beginning. So they're ready to start hunting right off the start. They have 300 animals, prey animals, that are available for them to find and kill. There are conditions under which they have to, they operate to kill. For example, they have to have at least 3 other members of their hunting party around them in order to successfully kill a large animal and bring it down and then gain the resources that come from this. They follow reproduction procedures and they follow death instructions in terms of the age. I had to go through, and each one of these, if you're writing a model like this, I'll just give you as an example, I had to figure out, let me see, one thing I had to figure out was how frequently did hunter-gatherers have babies? In the absence of contraception or family planning, how frequently could you expect a female to become pregnant? And it turns out that from observation of historical, that is known hunter-gatherers and currently existing hunter-gatherers, it turns out that they space children at about 3 years apart. And that has a whole bunch of different reasons. It has to do with the metabolic load the mother carries, postponement of ovulation by breastfeeding, a whole variety of things. But that's a nice fixed value that I had to research in order to give the model empirical validity. I also had to figure out in this model how much nutrition should these hunter-gatherers get from the animals that they are killing. And I have animals being reproduced, and animals also need to be dying just from natural causes, not just dying from being caught by hunter-gatherers. So how long do these animals live in the wild? And so I had to go through and find out the primary species that were hunted by this population of humans, what their average life expectancy was, and then plan their death cycles relative to that. as well as then nutrition and other features that they would gain from these animals. So it became it becomes complicated, and the way the model is set up, it's really, you have 3 breeds. You basically have hunter-gatherers, prey animals, and farmers. You have a series of variables that belong to either the hunter-gatherers or the prey animals, including their nutritional value and then their age, so on. You have the initial setup procedures, and I wanted to show you at least one thing in this, which is, this is the go procedure here. And each one is defining a procedure, a behavior that the hunter-gatherers need to follow. So one is they need to organize themselves into hunting parties. Second then, once they're organized, they need to hunt. And then once they hunt, they have to also then kill the animal. And part of killing the animal is butchery and distributing the resources to everybody in the hunting party, or all members of the band on whose behalf they are out hunting. Now, just to give you an indication of validity, right? Validity of this model. We know for a fact that food is not distributed evenly in hunter-gatherers, among hunter-gatherers when they successfully kill an animal. It's actually distributed based on a couple of different factors, but one of the main factors is that the males bargain with extra meat for status and for standing and for reproduction rights within tribal groups. And so children do not get as much food as adults, and females do not get as much food as males. Right? So one lack of validity in this is that I don't take that into account at all. I distribute whatever is killed evenly among the entire population. So that would be one place where if you were looking at this, you would say, well, that's not really the way the world works. But the 3 main steps, that you have to organize, that you hunt in hunting parties, that you kill and distribute the resources you capture, those are true to life. Next, you have the prey animals who need to graze in their world. These are mostly animals that do grazing: rabbits, goats, wild pigs, wild cattle, sheep. And then they need to reproduce, and they also need to have a death condition. So how do new ones come in? How do some die? Now, the hunter-gatherers also need to have a set of conditions. They need to reproduce. They need to die, considering certain parameters. And then I also have this one final one here called consider farming. That's more or less a last step, that if their life becomes miserable and they're going hungry, they actually begin to decide to transition from hunter-gatherer opportunities to staying in one place, taking control of the land, and growing their resources rather than going out and finding their resources. This is the evolution of agriculture historically. Now, here's what I want to show you. Well, then there are all these helper programs that are down here that run everything for those steps, but you can see all the steps that are in the model. All right, so if we go set up, calibrate, and then go, you're going to see that the animal population and the human population are relatively stable. Hold on. Stop a minute. I think there. But every so often, if you look at this, I have an incredible peak of prey animals. And part of that is the result that the hunter-gatherers are not searching in those places where they are reproducing. See, what should be happening in this model is in a stable population, you should have something like this. So when one population gets small, the other population increases. Then when that population increases too greatly, it then is held in check by the other population that becomes dominant, that kills them in this predator-prey relationship. And so long as there aren't too many wolves and there aren't too many sheep, they can be in homeostatic equilibrium for a long time. In this model, here's the main thing you want to look at, is you want to look at the space between here and down here. What you're seeing is a peak of the prey animals in terms of their abundance of resources. Then you're going to see it start to drop because climate change is occurring. That is, that cooling period that we were talking about leads to a drop in resources. Corresponding with that, you begin to see a drop in the number of hunter-gatherers because of the decline. There are fewer and fewer animals for them to prey upon. And at the same time, you have people, as they are getting hungry, deciding to move into areas where wild grain stands exist that can be domesticated. Goats were actually the first animal to be domesticated, and sheep and other animals. They begin to control the development of their own food supply because this has now proven to be unreliable. They are dying out. And the interesting thing about this is in this space is exactly as you would expect. You see that the death of humans is delayed behind the death of the prey animals. That is, their environment degrades first, and then slowly human population begins to suffer and decline as well. And if they develop farming, then they can survive. If they don't, then they go extinct as well. That's what the model is supposed to show or is supposed to be doing. Now, there are two problems with the model. One is this peak up here is too big. It should not extend that high. We see nothing like that in the fossil record to indicate that kind of wild growth. At the same time, this drop here, which is the result of global cooling, the degradation of the environment on which the animals depend, that's too steep. So it really should be far more gradual like this, with human population similar to it and then slowly dropping down. So the overall model is good, but it doesn't correspond to reality exactly, right? And that's been the problem mostly for the last 5 or 6 weeks. I've been playing with various settings that might smooth this out some and slow down the extinction or the slow extinction of the animals on which they are dependent. Then there's one other feature about this. Every so often, let me see if we can get it this time. Every so often, the animal population runs crazy. That is, you remember the sheep-wolf predation model where the sheep totally control the earth? Now, this is actually a pretty interesting run. This version right here, that's actually much closer to what you would expect. See, now that's not bad. But I don't have the right just to pick that outcome. I have to show that the model's valid, I have to run it again and again. And every so often, I'll get this crazy set of events. Let's speed this up so we don't have to look at it. All of these guys are doing mostly the same. There! See, that's it. Same rules, everything else. Well, I mean, part of what you can see is that they've been hunting around here in this area and they're hunting around this area. And because their hunting patterns are not, they're not even more evenly distributed, reproduction goes bazooki, goes crazy in these areas right here. That happens like once out of 5 runs on the model, once out of every 8 runs on the model.
So which means you have different outcome, then the outcome should be like a distribution.
That's correct. Now, now this is a problem. Doesn't matter whether or not it's a distribution or not. That right there, if that model can throw that as a result, I mean, that's like, so.
But you know, it would be very interesting to know what kind of mechanism to create things like that, hypothetical.
That's correct. I would love to know, and I think I do know what it has to do with the algorithms that I use to move the hunting parties around.
Okay.
And so they're not mobile enough to be working the entire landscape that they're working. I should expect from this model that. And so sometimes the count is 93, the number of ticks is 85, the number of ticks is 130. Sometimes the population gets up to 600, sometimes down to 300 or 400. And I get, as I run many examples, I get this normal distribution. So right here, this is, right? The counts, the number of times that it produced these results should be much greater than it produced these more extreme results over here. And the same thing over here. That one model right there, though, that's off the grid, right? That means something's wrong. That it's not just an outlier, it is something that needs to be fixed. And that was the point when I'm showing you this model, is that you run sequences of models. Most of the time, your models are going to produce a range of results, and you need to find ways to come to terms with that. And we've said multiple times the way in which you do that is that you plot the outcomes and set up the distribution, understand the distribution, and even more importantly than that then, look at reality and find out whether or not the reality you're trying to model generates a similar range of distribution of outcomes.
So that's my question is, what kind of theory you are using to create this kind of model? Because for this kind of model, it will be very easy to talking about the economic situation changes because the animals, because the way you need to survive.
Yes.
So that kind of drives to make you to change, but how big this kind of pressure so that you have to change the total production.
Means of production for the society. Yeah, absolutely.
Means of production. So which from my perspective is really like a means of production model testing.
It is actually testing the radical change of the climate, which then drives a regime change in the means of production. Okay. And the reason why I'm interested in that is because the means of production directly shapes the cultural opportunities that religion has in those contexts.
No, that's the thing, because I don't think all the scholars agree on this. Maybe some part of people say, no, culture is the first or something.
Yeah, no, this is a materialist explanation of how why religions look the way they do, and what the evidence is for that change in the evolutionary history. And agriculture, religion before agriculture is completely different from religion after agriculture, and has been basically the same ever since. So that's the theory.
I know.
That's the
I can see,
operational
so
theory.
I just want to verify with you, okay, whether this is the theory.
That is the theory.
So everybody knows we are talking about. Do you know what kind of dialogue I'm with Professor Dunn? Because I don't want to list just the dialogue between two of us.
Birthplace first or culture first?
Okay, I can explain in Mandarin to you.
Yeah, but what we're talking about is, do material conditions change culture, or does culture change the way we change first, or change independently of nature and then modifies nature to its culture? And I argue that material conditions change culture.
Yeah, okay. I just added some more explanation. 对于那个这个 model 本身是在讲说人类是什么时候从那个游牧变成到农耕。那它的 model 是要去看那些动物跟这些人类不能从动物那边得到满足的时候才会改成农耕。那从我们的理论的观点来看的话，这个比较是从物质论的观点，就是环境物质的变迁，然后改变 means of production。那可是事实上有不同的理论，有一种叫做文化论、唯心论的一种改变。那我刚才只是要确定说，刚才的 model 其实是比较是从物质论的观点来看这件事情。OK， so just tell them what kind of argument we are talking. Because I think that's very important, because the model, all the parameters we are using is based on the theory we are going to test.
Yes. And so the question, at one level, the question is, how compelling is it that these environmental conditions drive the shape of cultural expressions?
But I will be very curious, the alternative argument.
I actually don't know how I can't think of a compelling alternative argument. Mostly, I mean, because climate is before, animal existence is before cultural existence, climate is before animal existence, and so I can't imagine how. It's certainly the case that culture can feed back on material relations once it exists, but it's not the driving force. Okay, so if you find, the other feature of this is if you find that your model isn't fitting, it's completely legitimate to go back, and what I was showing you, I think, are examples of this, of fine-tuning, or what in modeling terms it's called calibration. Any of you photographers? You take a lot of pictures, and you know about white balancing film? With a camera comes with a default idea of what is white. Now, its idea of what white is generated under very specific sets of circumstances, not all of which are met in every situation where you take a picture. So when you move to a different context and you're getting ready to take a picture here, I point my camera, so it's like this is one of these cameras like this, and I say, look at that. I'm telling you that that's white. And then my camera adjusts the values for all the other colors based upon what I have told it is white, right? As a matter of fact, if you go into your camera setting, open up any picture that you have, and get a picture up, on your phone, hit edit, all right, and then hit tools. I think it's a tools, maybe not, adjust. There. And do you see all the different tools that it has listed under there? That one will, I can't show, I wish I could show you, but one is called white point, contrast, brightness. These are all different settings that shape what the phone thinks is white. And then that will adjust the color scheme on the picture itself, given the fact that under certain lighting conditions, things change. For example, white there looks very different from white like that, right? There are other conditions like in sunlight, your whites will get a kind of diffused yellow. In the United States, we call that eggshell white, eggshell, like the shell of an egg, which is different from like brilliant, pure white light. And so when you're taking pictures, you calibrate to the conditions. Your model oftentimes will need to be calibrated, which means those parameters are tinkered just a little bit here and a little bit there in order to do things like make sure this animal population here, that's a great outcome right there. I'm so happy with that compared to other examples. I wish I got that all the time. But if I see a phenomenon here that doesn't represent reality, then I can go in and say I can adjust. Let's see one of these factors that I can adjust. So this is their hunting procedure. I can make them move ahead 3 steps each thing instead of 2. And then I hit setup. And they're going to move around. But notice what happens, because they're moving so fast and so far around, they kill the population off in no time. Right? So it turns out that actually about 2.5, and I think it's even more sensitive, it's like 2.2 to 2.3. See?
It's better, right?
That was worse. So, and if I go down to 2, oh, got that, see? Now, if I try to compensate for that, it came at 2, so let's say I put 2.1, which would fix some part of it, because it means then that the hunters are moving around a little more in the space. Notice that 2.1 change led to that almost immediate death spiral.
So that will be the capacity to move, the mobility, the degree of mobility.
Degree of mobility of the hunting bands.
Yeah.
That population shoots up because they find places in this world where few hunters go, and they just reproduce like crazy. One thing I could do is introduce a resource limitation for the prey animals. That is, they starve because there are too many. But I haven't done that.
But the mobility, the degree of mobility seems
Pretty important.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
So then anything can help to improve the mobility.
Yes. Well, in this case, anything that does do that can improve the outcomes of the model.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And there are also a few other factors. It may be that the animals are reproducing at a rate that's too high, and so you could slow down their reproduction rate, and you don't get these population explosions. But in the end, for me, what I end up doing is you end up calibrating, fine-tuning every single setting a little bit. Like, that 2 to 2.1 change there seems to make a huge difference. Look at that.
Yeah.
See, that's it too. I get that. And now I'm getting it all the time. Maybe I didn't. Set up again, go again. There's a death spiral or extinction event. Yeah, see. I need this at 2.5. There's that more standard outcome. Okay, so that's what we mean by calibrating. So you need to, on your models, you're in the end stages of building your models, designing them, turning them in, I hope, right? Yes, you're all getting there. You want to start looking at what you have, looking at reality, and then doing some fine-tuning, which is totally legitimate, called calibrating your model. Last step is replication. What was the word, the Mandarin word we had up here? Fuqi? So replication is that process of giving your model over to someone else. So, and there are lots of consideration about whether, when people verify or replicate your model, factors come into play like, what was the hardware you were using? I mean, literally, what computers were you using? What processors were you using? That can sometimes affect model performance. What programming language is being used? There are all kinds of different computer languages. What languages do you program in mostly? If you guys write computer program, when you've learned how to write computer program, what do you write? Python? Nothing else? C++. Fortran? COBOL? MS-DOS? Any of you old enough to remember MS-DOS? DOS commands?
That's way beyond our...
Yeah, you and I are old enough to remember it. Yeah, but yeah, there are people that still write in DOS just for fun. Right. Yeah? Do you remember DOS? DOS was awesome. I remember when I was younger, when they went to this Windows environment, they shifted from, it used to be you had a command line and you typed in your DOS commands, right? And then it went to this with these pop-down windows, and I thought, that's not programming, right? That's a toy. And then they came out with this too. And for like 5 years, I refused to use a mouse, right? Oh, no, I'm never going to use a mouse. I'm going to do this, right? MS-DOS, that's what computer programming is supposed to be, right? So I didn't keep up with all these innovations, or I resisted them.
And eventually found it was very useful.
I did. Depends on the day of the week. Sometimes I think it's not.
Because for our generation, we have witnessed no computer to have computer.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a big difference.
That is true. So what programming languages? There are lots of different programs. You've been learning one program language for NetLogo, but there are other toolkits that program, each one has similar but different languages. Every one of these here, Repast and Swarm, those are multi-agent modeling software packages. And they have their own code, right? You think it's a little crazy learning all of the NetLogo stuff, right? Now learn Repast and now learn Swarm. Because there may be people who get a copy of your model and say, I want to see if I can do this in Repast or in Swarm. And then it'll generate results that look very similar to your results, but it'll follow a completely different scheme or pattern. And then you two have to sit down and decide, what does that mean? And then also, sometimes you can actually use a different set of algorithms to produce the same results. So those are all factors when someone's trying to replicate your model or you're trying to replicate theirs. It isn't basically that they give you their code and you type their code into the computer and then you run it, right? Because of course that's going to do exactly what the person tells you it's going to do. But you're trying to replicate it in the sense that you say the findings actually correspond to reality. So replication is a success. This is how you know when your model is replicated is first off, there is numerical equivalency that results. That is, those end results, like on my model, I had 64 farmers out of an initial population of 100 hunter-gatherers. Right? If someone else builds a model similar and they get the same kinds of results, right, then that is numerical equivalency. In the case of random numbers, when those are used in models, then you have to do this process of telling them what specific seed you used to generate the random numbers in the model. Alternatively, then, the last one is to find distributional equivalence. That's where I have this bell curve distribution and someone else builds a model very similar to my own, and they might end up with something like that, right? But distributionally, the model is equivalent. That's pretty close, within a margin of error. So you compare the statistics that you cook from the results that you get. Next, as part of your replication, you always show your source code. That is the code that's on the code page. It produces the results that you see in the interface, but it's pretty easy to get decent looking results on the interface. People really need to see the code. Most people will not be able to understand your source code, but then most people aren't going to try to replicate your model, right? The interface is for people who don't program but want to understand your model. Those who do program, they want to see your source code to see how you're accomplishing that. And you need to give that to them so that they can see how you did what you're doing, or what you say you're doing. On page 344 in the textbook, it lists all the replication steps and scrutiny that will be given to your model. A complete list of publishing guidelines if you were ever to get to a place where you wanted to show your model for publication purposes on page 346. Doug, if you include modeling in a dissertation, that list of requirements is like a checklist of things you want to do in order to put your model out in the world. Okay, well, one of the things that I wanted to show you was a couple of the additional functions that you can perform with NetLogo. This is in chapter 8 on advanced functionalities. I can describe some of these without showing them to you, but one extension is HubNet, where you run a central computer with NetLogo open and running on it, and then you invite a variety of people to log into your computer through HubNet, and they can participate in your model. They'll be able to see your model on their screens, and they will be able to do things to your model. Let me see, I'm trying of an asynchronous video game like this. Video games, they usually call it like a pit boss game, where you have one person who's the central host and other people log in, and then you go around and each person takes turns doing something in the gaming environment, one person at a time. Well, in NetLogo, you can program it in such a way that each person has control of what's happening in the model, and they can take turns manipulating slight changes in the model to run the model in different ways. Or you can build a model that requires 4 different decisions, as if you were an agent in this world modifying something. It's more or less the ability for you to network with other people and have NetLogo running live in that network. GoGo is an extension that you plug in to NetLogo, and it allows you to run robots using NetLogo. And it allows you to collect information from sensors, to light up LED lights, to signal things in the rest of the world. And Arduino, if you know Arduino, is a simple Raspberry Pi and Arduino are the two most popular small microprocessors that you can buy for next to nothing. And you put them on, robot nerds love Legos and Arduinos. They can make little robots for next to nothing, and you could control it using NetLogo. Essentially what you could do is you could assign a robot, you could assign a few robots to serve as agents in your world. And as an agent does something in NetLogo, the robot would replicate it on the floor in your room if for whatever reason you would like to have NetLogo run a set of robot interactions, right, in your world. GIS extension, that stands for Geographic Information System, is the standard mapping software that almost everybody uses worldwide. And this allows you to import maps, like a map of the city, directly into NetLogo, and it'll plot the roads and buildings and other things right onto the checkerboard, your patch world, that is NetLogo. It has extensions for Mathematica and MATLAB, which are the two big math software environments in which you can operate. So if you wanted to do trigonometry all the time, Mathematica and MATLAB plugins are very important. Python and R extensions are both really important. Python is the dominant language that people program in these days, and R is a specific set of statistical tools that allow you to manipulate data in really, really useful ways. It's the #1 data mining software out there. It has a sound control. You can make your agents say things or at least squeak that you plug into a soundboard, a MIDI controller, which more or less gives you something like 150 different musical notes. And so if, say you have turtles that step on a blue patch, they make one note. If they step on a brown patch, they make a different note. I don't know why you would need that, but you can do it for a wide variety of things. Some people study sounds that way and are interested in the, let me see. Well, you have cicadas here in Taiwan. In the hot summertime, they make this sound that almost gets coordinated and reverberates. In the woods, you'll hear it, large populations of insects. You know cicadas from the United States, right? In the summertime in Duke, you would hear them. Yeah, what do you call those in Mandarin? What would you call those kinds of? Chan? This vibrating sound?
Yes.
There are people that are interested in the same way that they're interested in how birds flock. They're interested in understanding how those animals synchronize, because there are certain points at which it reaches this incredible sound, and then it gets disorganized, and then it gets reorganized again. And you could spatially represent that in NetLogo and assign it sounds to try to get that emergent sound coming out of your computer. And the program that you would build in NetLogo would basically be like the flocking model we have for birds flying and fish schooling.
And also there is one model about the firefly.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of that too. In the back of my head, there's a famous complexity mathematician, Barabbas, something like that. His last name is something. And he did this, he was the first one to kind of calculate the ways in which fireflies synchronize.
Yeah，就是萤火虫同时会发光。Yeah, it's kind of maybe we can also use the.
We can look at it, yeah?
Yeah, it's more like a flat model, right?
Yes, I think. Actually, the library is living on my machine. So I think I can get that one.
Yeah, I think that's a very famous case.
It is a famous one.
Yeah, especially in the study of the social networks also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see, models library. Go away. I've got it. It looks like it must be doing something when it's slower. So what's it doing?
Flashing.
Oh, I see. Some of them are flashing and some of them are not flashing. So when they're not flashing, they're dark. You can't see them.
Oh, okay. It's the flashing of fireflies.
So I think if you look at the bottom here, the peaks is that more and more are getting on one wavelength. But it's never getting higher, like that's the highest one right there.
It's the proportion.
Probably there are some
I think it's the number.
parameters maybe adjusted so that flash flies they tend to flash together.
It says there are 1,500 up to that much. 2,000. Let's do that.
But there is also like a
Cycle length, flash,
fresh length.
flashing.
Fresh length. Wow. Then more.
Which makes sense because they just stay lit longer. So all that we're doing is making them more visible, the ones that are already there.
Oh no, sine waves.
Sine waves are good.
And on and off is the short time price.
By the way, back here, if we turn it back down and hit stop and go back to whatever it was before, it's always going to, you watch, this is always going to be a sine wave, even that one. See, even that one's going to be, it's going to sooner or later generate sine waves. See, we were looking at something like that, and all, oh! So why did that happen? Just now. I don't know.
I think it takes longer time to get it.
You think it's always going to go that way sooner or later?
Yes. See? So maybe there is
All right.
some kind of breaking point.
Let's try if it'll take longer if you make more, if you put more in there.
So I think it's the result will be the same, but the time to achieve the result will be different.
Based on how fast the flash rate is.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me.
So then we need to find out what's the time to reach.
Yes, and that'll be the factor.
Yeah.
So this is simply indicating all lit, none lit, all lit, none lit. Yeah. And I bet if you look at the code, to go, move, increment clock, and recolor. Look at that. That's the entire go procedure right there. Very simple. And you get that big result. The guy that did this, no, it's not those guys. Oh well. Thought it was my Barabbas guy that I was saying. Ba guy. Okay, I can't show you any of the examples of the further extensions without internet connection, so we'll pick that up a little bit next time around. Anybody need like immediate help on their models? Anybody stuck somewhere and you need advice from me? I'm just going to say that class is going to end now. It's 10 after. And if you need something with your model and you want to do a quick conference about it, then I can do that with you now for the next 15 minutes or so, till the bus goes. So it's up to you. Okay?